I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gonna feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for
The first entity that had stuck itself to me was a very predatorial, non-human entity. It was very ancient. It had actually been on another investigator 8 months prior to me catching the damn thing. I spoke to this woman, and she had written 2 books on this particular entity. And man, we were able to swap stories and identify that it was the same energy that we both experienced.
It is that time again. Got a brand new episode for you this week. The guest this week is going to be Michael Roehl from the Dark Hour Paranormal podcast. Now you can find Michael's podcast and show on YouTube and Facebook, and where other fine podcasts are distributed. I'll have those links in the description, of course. One of the main reasons I had him on, other than the fact he's a longtime paranormal researcher, he just got back from researching Montauk up in New York. And for those of you that don't know, that is the real-life inspiration for the show Stranger Things that everybody knows and loves. Well, you know, Stranger Things. Hopper, Russia, all that good stuff. Nosebleeds. Before we get started, just check the description for all the links to this podcast. We've got a Facebook, an Instagram, a TikTok, which is really kicking off. We got about 5,000 views in the last couple of weeks from our last episode with Randy Bauer on the Minnesota Bigfoot. If you haven't checked that one out, but be sure to share, trying to get this podcast to 1 million subs however we can. And like, comment, subscribe, and let everyone know. Without further ado, here is Michael Roehl of Dark Hour Paranormal.
So Dark Hour Paranormal, as the outfit that it stands, was created back in 2008, 2009 by myself and one other individual. And our whole intention was to go out and do ghost investigating and so forth, which we did quite extensively. At some point within the next year, I believe it was 2010, we had the opportunity to create something for television. And in filming the pilot, there were 2 locations that we went to wherein I caught attachments coming back that ended up wreaking havoc on my life for about 3 months separately. So it was 6 months in total. It was sort of back to back. After the first one had happened, I thought I had enough sense not to go back to another location, but I just so happened to have, again, an opportunity to go out with a handful of people to a very different type of place, undisclosed. And that was something that I was willing to at least entertain, because I absolutely felt drawn still to be, researching this one way or another, even though I know I had kind of come up against some peril with the first location. So once this kind of unfolded, and I'm making a long story short,
Make it long.
I had to make some measures to, protect myself. And of course, going through what I went through with the paranormal in that sense, I learned one thing specifically, and that, well, actually 2, I should say. The first is that when you go to a location and you ask to communicate, they don't necessarily come at that very moment. As we understand, time is not linear, especially observed from that other side, if you will. They come when they come. And this might be when you're sitting at home 2 days later watching Seinfeld on TV. It could be when you're in class, a week later. It could be, hanging out with your family, having a dinner the following evening. They come because you call, and there's some sort of honor system that goes that if you make the request, they are supposed to be able to come and honor that request regardless what it is. But when they do, when they show up, they're expecting whatever task you have for them to unfold. So if you decide at the point that you're, sitting eating dinner with your family, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know that you were going to be here now, but can you come back later? It doesn't really work like that when you go to a location and specifically open that door. They're there then. The second thing that I learned was that it's not necessarily the end of the world if you do catch one of these attachments, if you face it head on, which in one way, shape, or form, you will always have to do to kind of state your own ground, your space, bring it back to yours, reclaim your power from this entity. When you confront them, there's actually, in some regard, a little bit of logic that goes behind what you're going to say and what's going to be interpreted and how this is going to play out in respect to the connection. So in my example, The first entity that had stuck itself to me was a very predatorial, non-human entity. It was very ancient. It had actually been on another investigator 8 months prior to me catching the damn thing. I spoke to this woman, and she had written 2 books on this particular entity. And man, we were able to swap stories and identify that it was the same energy that we both experienced. So again, this was a well-known entity that was roaming this area. I didn't do anything wrong. I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And apparently I was told this thing was hungry. So that's why it latched on to me. I kind of opened that door. So in confronting it in my mind's eye, which I literally had to do at one point. I mean, it's the feeling that it imparts on you is if somebody has a dagger to the back of your neck and you're walking throughout your day, and yet at any moment this person could just slice the dagger down, and they might, but you don't know when it's coming. You just know it's coming. That's the foreboding, dreadful feeling that you walk around with. So it's absolutely draining just for that alone. Now, again, coming back to the confrontation, I had to state why I had called it to me, regardless of what I was going to think about it or this entity was going to react. I had to state what my intention was. In doing so, I feel very lucky because I actually apologized. I guess I didn't sit there and say, oh, I'm so sorry, but I did express acknowledgement that perhaps the timing here wasn't right and that I did it incorrectly. And thankfully this thing started to back off, and in my mind's eye, as I mentioned, it was right there. And then as we're talking or having that conversation of sort, it's now moving back a little further, until it was way back, about half a football field away, if I were to make some conjecture here, giving that spatial distance. And it was just sitting back there, and it sat back there for another 3 weeks to a month before it finally disappeared. So you have to be careful in the way that you go about, working with some of these energies. From that point, I realized that I couldn't investigate the way that people were traditionally investigating. And so I had to actually quit the outfit. I had 2 other guys on the team. And, that was a very tough day to tell them, listen, I can't go forward with this. And they, of course, were a bit upset. I can't tell you that they completely understood because they didn't experience the same thing. But it was the reality of what I was facing. Now, for years afterwards, up until about 2018, 17, I didn't really touch much of the paranormal stuff. I had some experiences that affected me drastically where I was living, but this only further pushed me away from wanting to deal with the paranormal again. At one point I said, let me start doing, the type of research that I can from a distance. Let me see if that makes a difference. And I noticed that I could, without having too much trepidation in respect to the subject matter. There were some exceptions, of course, but even in those circumstances, I was able at one point to return to that research. So in doing this, I started garnering my knowledge again. I mean, I've always been interested in the paranormal, ufology, cryptozoology, healing, you name it. I've always been interested in this stuff since, the early 90s. And this resurgence of interest came back full effect. Now, at this point, I started gathering information and experiences I was recounting and still having some to a certain degree at this point. I was saying, well, how do I impart this on people at large? I mean, I was in radio for quite some time, but this was earlier in the 2000s, and I hadn't really had another in the way that I used to. Once I had, gone and toured on different musical projects, I had to abandon the radio stuff. Obviously this is more localized. I was being more global. So through a little push and a little pull, a friend of mine had told me, he said, listen, why don't you get on the YouTube? I said, okay, well, I'll consider that. It's different format. You have the video and so forth, but let me get into some radio apps and stuff first. So I did. And then 2019, that's but 2019, 2020, I said, okay, let's do this. I'm going to get on YouTube. And that's when Dark Hour Paranormal, as the show we all know today, was.
Still there?
Oh, yeah. You hear me?
Sorry. Sorry, yep. I thought you thought I was talking.
Nope.
Well, that is cool. Well, you described the entity as ancient. Was it ancient human or ancient demon?
This was an entity that was This was an entity that was so old that it didn't respond to white light protection or any of your traditional methods of um, some sort of repellent. So, I mean, when I saged the house, it got incredibly angry. Trying to surround myself with white light, I was attacked even more. And the person I had spoken to who had verified first and foremost that this was something of interest and that he had come across it before, he had told me, he said, listen, this was not on the property initially. This was raised by people who, consider themselves Satanists and, working with certain magic. They opened a portal. He said, this thing came through. They couldn't put it back in there and they couldn't close the portal. So that's what's still on the property. He says, that's why it's actually there. Now, there were a couple methods that he wanted me to kind of approach as I move forward, with dealing with this entity, none of which, I'll be honest with you, I had time for. I mean, I had to take care of this as soon as possible because it was already just, starting to trickle out into peripheral connections that I had, family and friends. It wasn't just affecting me. So time was of the essence, to say the least. But it's one of those type of energies that's never been human and really doesn't belong in this realm. But when they have certain access to that realm or whatever realm that they don't normally belong in, they generally take it. And I don't know if it's to explore or if it's to satiate an appetite of some sort. I would expect possibly the latter of those two in most cases, but you never know because these things don't hold a human personality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's that particular, the word attachment kind of makes me want to turn some more lights on in here.
Oh, absolutely.
And, that's like I tell people, they always say you don't want to see, I always tell people I want to see a ghost, but not in my own house. But I know I don't want to living in a haunted house. Those shows get me so bad because I'm like, I can't imagine, just getting up in the middle of the night to go to the restroom and sweet mother of God, there's a Victorian age kid standing in a closet. Oh God. But I want to see one, but at the same time, there's a 50-50 chance you're rolling a dice. It's coming home with you.
The thing, sorry, go ahead.
That's it. That was it.
Now, the thing is this too. I mean, when I was living in a property that did have some sort of angry spirit there, it made itself known pretty early on to moving in. And it did this through sort of wedging itself between myself and the person that I was with at the time. And it was immediately, once we got into that house, boom, we started fighting. We had not fought before. Literally, the first week we got in there, and it actually affected the way that the rest of the relationship unfolded after that. But in this experience, I tried to do as much research as I could, but I had the intuition that this was, something that was human, but now very malevolent, or at least angry enough that it appeared to have some sort of genuine evil intention. And then it started attacking my daughter, who was one and a half at the time. Now, we knew this was happening because she would wake up from a sound sleep screaming, and she always looked at one corner of her room where the closet was, and I could feel that there was a gathering of energy there at the very least. I mean, I couldn't say that I saw it with any sort of visceral interpretation, but I could feel the heaviness, that darkness. It felt like a hole in the wall. That's how empty it was, but this thing could move around. So at that point, I felt it was my duty, even as weak and tired as I already was, to sort of stand up against this and face it on the etheric battlefield, if you will. So when my daughter would wake up, I'd go and I'd get her and I'd put her into our bed and I'd go back into the room and I'd be in there for 45 minutes to an hour in a meditation where I'm literally pushing this energy out of the room. Now, again, as exhausting as this was, it did yield results. But at the end of the day here, so to speak, I spend 45 minutes to an hour in a room, in the middle of the night, and this was happening almost every single night. It would stave off until the next evening, and then it would come back. If I didn't do that, though, and let it run rampant, I would feel it throughout the day. I could be sitting there playing a video game, something as simple as Silent Hill. I love the franchise. I was playing Silent Hill 2. Obviously played it many times before, know what I'm doing, not scared, in certain factors. And all of a sudden I felt this thing come up right behind me and it just latches on. And immediately I am almost in a panic. Like it's like having a panic attack, an anxiety attack. But that it's outside of yourself, something acting upon you. And I would look at the game and I was incredibly frightened by what I was playing because I was feeling something that was much deeper in respect to this rooted fear that was, I don't know if it enjoyed the content and then, latched on as a result, but it intensified that experience to the point where I had to shut the damn game off. And I tried it a couple times. Couldn't play it in that apartment. Now, very quickly, the curious thing is the couple that lived downstairs on the second floor, I would see outside occasionally, go outside, smoke a cigarette, whatever. They were out there and we would talk. And I would occasionally share some of the experiences that we were having upstairs. Now, I felt that there was a little girl in the apartment somewhere. I just had this feeling, but I never mentioned it to anybody, up to the point where the girl that was living downstairs told me, "Hey, I had a very interesting experience last night," she says to me one day. I said, "Really? What happened?" Because they didn't seem to be really believers. They didn't really have experiences, this young couple, but they were open-minded. She said, "Well, I woke up and I looked to my left on the side of my bed, and there was this little girl standing there soaking wet." I said, "You're kidding me." She goes, "Yeah." And she describes, this little girl in a certain periodic dress. And she said she seemed like she was looking for help. I don't think she said anything, but she seemed like she needed help. And I was like, wow, that's curious. How long did, the vision sustain? She said, not very long, but enough that I could see every detail. Well, come to find out, there was a little girl who had passed away from the pond, drowning in a pond, not far from the property. And this happened some years ago. I mean, the correlation is that I felt something in way of a little girl, and again, never mentioned it to anybody on that end. This neighbor who had no real connection with spirit world, but happened to open her eyes one night and look over and see this, the little girl was wet. So we did a little digging, and as far as we could tell, that was who was appearing. Now, I don't think that it was the same spirit or even really had connection to this malevolent one that was overarching. I think this thing was sort of after me, but it was still indicative of the property as far as I could tell. And I was worried if we moved, would this thing follow? Of course, it's a natural thought. But, thankfully, at one point, I just said, this is enough, and we need to vacate here. And sure enough, we were able to find another place and move in pretty smoothly. But man, let me tell you, that year and a half, 2 years that I lived in that apartment was absolute hell, my friend.
I couldn't imagine, especially with what do you think would cause a place to be, unsolicited? I've had this conversation with the lady I was talking with you about last night. What do you think would cause a place to be unsolicitedly haunted, if that makes sense? Like no real events or anything like anybody documents, just there's something here, minus the little girl, whatever was attacking you. Why was it there?
I find that a lot of those type of hauntings are generally indicative of the land itself. There may be something that happened there that was not documented. It's been lost to history, and it's
definitely a possibility there, not just undocumented.
Yeah, and I think a lot of cases that's what it is. In my opinion, going further into what this woman had seen with the little girl, I think the little girl came to her because maybe she was the same age as her mother when she was younger, when she had passed away. There's certainly some ideas that suggest there could have been a recognition of sort, and that's why she was reaching out to this younger lady. But again, it still lies in the realm of conjecture, when we're looking at this, because you just don't know the real reason unless you can find something that's authenticated, or you communicate with the spirit and it tells you itself, which occasionally does happen.
You ever had one do that, speak like to you and through the mind speak, kind of like a Sasquatch would?
Yeah, I mean, I have these things talking to me all the time. It's a matter of when I'm turning it on, when I'm turning it off. I mean, I'm very clairvoyant, and for what that's worth, clairaudience comes with that, clairsentience, all this sort of comes in the same package, if you will. But yes, there are many times I have full-on conversations with spirits that are either deceased or spirits that are spirit guides, maybe mine, maybe somebody else's. And sometimes I just have this stray one that comes in, makes a joke, and takes off. It's kind of interesting, but yes, I've definitely heard that before.
That's cool. I've wondered if that isn't something we're going to evolve in, all be able to do, or maybe we're evolving away from it.
I honestly think it's the former of what you're mentioning here.
Evolving
I think this
into
is
it.
The evolution.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if if we evolve to hear it, I wonder if it's a frequency that we'll even have technology one day to to turn an antenna to, and there it is, just a male of ghost. Oh, we do.
We do. Unfortunately, it goes back into talking about these black projects, but yeah, they already have it.
I hear it's tying together. Topics are wrapping up.
Let me put it this way, and I can't tell you where this is sourced from, but I'll tell you that this is legit. Okay. Let's just say a government official that was spoken to recently was asked the question, seriously, how far reaching is our technology today? What do we have? And this individual told this other person, they said, let me put it this way. Think about your wildest imagination. Okay. We're about 50 years ahead of that.
Shit.
So that tells you a lot right there. It leaves a lot open to imagination, but again, in the same breath of the word, sure enough, we've already got this technology. It's just a matter of who's using it.
And I've always wondered if we actually have a person on Mars or something like that by now. I know we're not talking about space travel, but I wonder if it's not like a black project. We've got a dude there, just there and back. Maybe we have some kind of teleportation, lack of a better word.
Well, honestly, I would say yes as an entirety. Okay. But at the same time, we've been to Mars, not necessarily on the same plane or time reference that, we're looking at it in the sky today. Maybe we could send somebody up there today. I think that's a very third dimensional perception of it. But, given what has been purported through Project Monarch, Project Pegasus, the Montauk Project, they all talk about going to Mars and going into the planet itself and finding artifacts from civilizations that lived there eons ago.
Did you say Monarch and Pegasus?
Mm-hmm. They were projects that began on one foot and then kind of merged into what we understand as Phoenix 1, 2, and 3 within the Montauk Project. MK Ultra is in there as well. Monarch, I think, was off of MK Ultra. Pegasus was more geared towards super soldiers. But yeah, they're all sort of these sub-programs within the large umbrella program that was Montauk.
I mean, where would they get that kind of tech from? Is it aliens, or we just come up with it?
I think a lot of it was empirical in respect to their experimentation. And at the same time, yes, we did get technology purportedly from extraterrestrials that, had their own intentions to give it to us. It wasn't anything benevolent. It was just, hey, we have a mission and giving this to you. That's why we're going to give it to you. And what they didn't want us to have, they wouldn't give us. You look at the Montauk chair, and this was supposedly from either the Syrians or the Palladians, the original one. I mean, there were several, I believe, throughout the lifespan of that project. And of course, Russia was also purported to have a chair as well, mirroring that project at the same time. So I don't know much about what happened over there. But I mean, again, this technology of being able to hook a human being up with, a certain biorhythm within the body and then matching it to the earth through technology was a study that they just, took a dial and hit one, said, okay, press the button. What happens to the person? Oh, they fried. Okay, get them out of there. Put another one in. 2, hit the button. What happens now? Okay, heads blows up. Boom, get them out. And continue on this experimentation. They're taking notes every time. Next thing you know, they're skipping from 1 to 5, and then 2 to 7, and they're getting a different result from. Again, I'm simplifying it here in the way of playing with frequencies and amplitude. The way that they were pushing the power up, and just basically messing with people to see what would happen.
You mentioned Russia having something similar. I've wondered if you obviously know the theory of they started coming here when we dropped the nukes back in the 40s. I wonder if that's the reason we haven't had any more wars, like near peer action, anything catastrophic, is because everybody's kind of tuned in, behind the scenes, 4 layers deep. Like there can't be a war because we're all on the same page by some sick association and by the elites, the lizard people, so to speak.
I think there's an element of truth to that. To a certain degree. I think most wars have been acted out as a certain drama, distraction, paradigm shift. This was all contrived. I mean, who profits off wars? The banks and, certain privatized organizations.
Oh, yeah.
So when you have governments like the Illuminati, or you have the shadow governments behind them, they're the ones dictating the reality. So if they set the stage, well, we're all engaged as characters, even if you don't know you're in that play. And the outcome of that stage is where you're going to live. They're going to still be in the audience and are free to leave the auditorium anytime they want because they're outside of it, setting it up the way that they have.
Yeah, it's just the reason I'm kind of, when the Ukraine thing kicked off, everybody was like nuclear war. I'm like, I don't think that's going to happen. Like I don't think that they're going to allow it. I mean, first, the simplest lowest common denominator, mutual annihilation would be the best deterrent. But I don't think that powers that be would let a war like that happen. I think since Germany and the Nazis with their Indiana Jones Temple of Doom, experiments, and us with the nuke, I don't think that anything outside of a skirmish like Iraq, Vietnam, Syria is going to happen like ever again until they can, unless it suits them on a bigger scale. I just don't think it'll get out of control like the mushroom clouds of the, the dystopian movies.
I would have to agree with you on that. I've been told many times this is either the 6th or 7th time that we're actually living out the same timeline, because in those other attempts, we actually did end ourselves in one way or another, and we destroyed the planet, and somehow we're afforded another chance. But that's a different story altogether. There's a possibility that we might make it through this time. You know what I mean? We can get to that certain point where we evolve past the aggression and the acts of complete annihilation, attrition, and so forth. I mean, these are old world ideas. And as, the wars progress in respect to technology and technique, hopefully we're going to move forward with a certain perception that does the same in a very progressive way rather than a deleterious way, that we continue to, make these conflicts in a very third dimensional physicality. Many people have told me who astral project, Preston Dennett being one of the most prominent. He mentioned, you'll see some sort of conflict or a fight on the other side, when you're in your spirit body or what have you, and you're watching these two individuals slap each other around, punch each other, stab each other, shoot each other, and you're just not getting hurt. Or you're getting the wound and you're going through that and it heals up immediately and you're back on your feet hitting that person again. You literally can't hurt each other in the spiritual form the way that, we would think that we could hurt each other here. So, yeah, I mean, we'll have to see. Time will tell. But as long as we continue to be aggressive about our inquiry in respect to this reality, and we stay steadfast in our research and our conviction that those who know need to provide answers to the questions that are universal rights, that we should have some of these answers while people are sitting in the back holding on to them. It's up to us to move forward with this and make that happen in, using whatever impetus that we have to.
And I'm gonna have Preston on. Preston's gonna be on in September. I'm going to deep dive on that.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, yes, I reached out to him
all about that.
I went down through Damien's past guest list and just spammed the hell out of them. and I guess I kind of did that to you, but I got your email address the first day we met, so I don't think that counts.
Yeah, no, I was first.
Yeah, and on that same subject, I'm totally starting to buy into the simulation theory. It just seems
there's certainly an element to that. I mean, this reality is controlled by some sort of again overarching computer system. It's a very juvenile,
maybe not Red Dead Redemption,
but that's what it's been.
But it feels like something's out there that you can send a request to, and it comes back and see certain patterns and different things. I've seen certain things. It's just like, that's just not random. That just happened.
Think of it like this, the way that the eye is shaped, we're seeing things upside down. The brain makes the flip. So, there's much to reality that, we're looking at and we take for granted, but it's malleable. All right. It's very, very flexible. It's constantly in flux. And because it happens so slowly, as things generally do in the third dimension, we don't observe as readily, only through the aspect of the fourth dimension, which is time.
Hopefully that changes soon too.
What exactly?
I said hopefully that changes soon too, so we can do some time traveling. I don't know if that's going to be possible, but that's another show there entirely.
Well,
wait a minute, that's my wildest imagination.
They did it already. They've done it. according to many people who are involved in these black projects that I've spoken to. And I'm not talking about just the key players. I'm talking about people who have survived and are very convicted that they went through these experiences, have long vast stories to support this, even with names that are there. It's again, you look at somebody like Andrew Basiago, and know that his story has never changed, and is incredibly detailed. And you have to sit back and wonder, okay, this guy was trying to run for president of the United States not too long ago. And one of the biggest pitches on his platform was that he was going to put teleportation systems into the public transit. And this would, very much help, certain things in respect to cities, how they were functioning, time, energy, efficiency, and so forth. And again, unless the guy is absolutely batshit nuts, he had something there. He said, we have the technology, I can get it, just elect me for president and you'll have it. So I mean, it could go either way, but here we go again with another person who was associated with these projects, and again really talks about how they were doing this manipulation, even if he can't write down scientifically how it happened.
And he's still alive?
Yes, he is.
Ooh,
I've spoken to him. Yep.
Oh.
He's a very, very nice individual. He's been around our circle for a little bit, but he only does one interview a month. So if you're interested in speaking with him, just be aware that that's sort of the deal with him.
That may be one of those bucket list items once I break the 100 followers barrier,
Mm-hmm.
Start going for those meaty fish. All right, now that you've completely spiraled me down to the government black project rabbit hole, let's just move over to Montauk. Am I correct in the saying that it is the real life Stranger Things?
Stranger Things was based off of that.
Yes, that's what it was. Okay, I'm like, I know it's something with Stranger Things. I can't remember. And it was in New York or New Jersey.
I think the working title was Montauk before they changed it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's a lot of elements in there that reflect what people have said happened, and Preston Nichols' story is in there very deeply, but there are others that are intertwined as well. If you're privy enough to kind of pick it out, Duffer Brothers did a fantastic job with that presentation, and they really picked up on something heavy. And then you have to ask yourself, out of a project that was just about dead, right? In respect to people, being oversaturated with this, Preston had passed away, Duncan passed away, Al Balick passed away in 2012. Within an 8-year period, all the guys that were really standing at the forefront had passed away. You would think that this sort of goes into oblivion to some degree. It gets, pushed by the wayside in people's consciousness. And all of a sudden, here comes Stranger Things. And boom, huge resurgence in interest in this. And not just Montauk, but black projects in general. There's got to be a reason for that. It's not done. It's not done yet.
And what's the meat and potatoes of Montauk, and what did you find out when you were there?
I've been researching this area for a very long time. Being there physically is a very draining experience. It's a very strange experience to be in Camp Hero and in Montauk itself. It's a very magical place.
And that's New York?
Huh?
And that's New York?
It's Long Island, New York, yes.
Okay. I just wanted to get that straight, if anybody was listening.
No, absolutely. It's one of those, I've never been anywhere in my life that was similar to this place in respect to knowing that anything could happen. I'll give you an example. We were down there this past time. Now we went to a birthday party with a friend of Peter Moon's, while we were there last year, and had a fantastic time. And there was a woman whose birthday it was. She was the host, living at this house, whatever, nice cordial time, great conversations, shook hands and left and went about our ways. Down this year, okay, we're walking along in Montauk, going to some of these little stores, grabbing a bite to eat here and there. Brian Minnick looks over at the board and he sees this woman's business card on the board. He's like, oh, look, it's that person's business card. We're like, wow, that's weird. Yeah, I know it's a smaller town, but okay, cool. Next thing you know, we go to a grocery store the next day. 2 people in front of us, there she is. She's talking to somebody else. But there's a disconnect. We don't see each other, but I'm aware of her, Next day, we were there, I think, for 4 days. So it was 3 days in a row. there was another thing that came up that had to do with her in public. And I said to him, I said, if we see her again, I have to talk to her now, because this is now borderlining synchronicity rather than something just out of the blue, happen to be in the area. So you see a business card, she lives here. We just, stumbled upon it. There's something here. But that's just Montauk, that's just Montauk.
God, that's creepy. That's like some kind of sci-fi channel show.
Oh yeah.
That's the kind of things that happen to me I think to the simulation.
Well, speaking of, when you speak about simulations, I've never been more convinced that we might be actually living in one than when I first came back from Montauk, the first 3 days back last year. The reason for this is because I was experiencing instantaneous synchronicities, which I've never experienced before. And I'll give you an example of that. So I'm on the ferry riding back, and, ferry's windy. I got my hat on, and I look over to my right and I see a woman. She's looking down. I don't know if she's reading a book or something, but she's, facing me in a couple rows up. And I go to push up my hat just a little bit so that I can, kind of see a little bit better. And without even looking up, this woman lifts her hand in a mirror fashion and pushes on her hat the same exact way. As I drop my hand, her hand drops the same way. I'm like, weird. So I go to brush the hair out of my eyes, long hair, so it gets in your eyes when the wind's going. Very quickly, I brush my right eye, literally the same exact time, as if it were planned, choreographed even. She lifts her hand up, wipes it the same way over her face, and puts it back down. There was one more thing that she did too that mirrored that action within, a 10-second period. And I kind of, my eyes went wide and I turned around and I kind of freaked out for a second. I was like, what is going on here? That, I'm seeing this mirror action. I saw that happen with people in public, specifically for the next 3 days when I came back from Montauk. And on that ferry, prior to this even happening, I was looking out towards Montauk and I could feel the pull. I was in that 1,000-yard stare and just locked, wasn't blinking, wind's blowing my eyes or getting dry. And I'm thinking to myself, I feel like I'm just stuck, but I can't move. Like, it's just an intensity that I can't get out of. And I knew at that point, because I had visited it physically, that it did make a connection with me. It made that last final connection. I'd been connected etherically already, in dream as well. But now that I had put my foot on that soil, it was like that sealed the deal. I was now connected. There was nothing I could do about it. So maybe that had something to do with it. But again, I've never been to a place that's so anomalous the way that Montauk is.
Was it like that before they started those experiments? Or is it
From
just the land itself?
Yeah. Well, it was a very sacred place for the Algonquin Indians. Very sacred place. And, when the settlers came over here, they were moving all kinds of things around. I mean, there's a church down there built out of stones taken directly from an Indian burial ground. And when you look at the church, it looks like they just had to take them for decoration. It wasn't anything structural. So, you have a lot of this magical energy that's down there. Again, that the natives and indigenous people were certainly utilizing and respected during those times. The plot of land that Camp Hero sits on has always been regarded as a very sacred area.
It almost reminds me of Skinwalker.
In a sense, because the place is full of portals. There were instances. Go ahead.
Go. Instances.
I'll just say very quickly, there were instances. I was talking to Peter Moon once again. We were sitting on the bluffs and just having a chat, waiting for Brian and his wife to come up from the beaches. And he was telling me about a group of people that he went to visit at one point. He's very active in these circles and so forth and attends these meetings. About 10, 12 people, whatever it was in this group. And they were going to go head out to Montauk on an excursion, which they did. So they met up, following a few days later, whatever it was. And they were all talking about this cave that they found on the side of the bluffs. Like, yeah, it was a huge cave. You walk in it. It's a huge natural cave. It's absolutely amazing. Never seen anything like it before. And Peter's like, oh, really? I didn't know anything about that. Can you take me there? They're like, yeah, sure. So like 5 or 6 of them agreed to come out on an expedition of sort. And they went to the exact place where this cave was, and it was not there. Now, Peter's explanation was that this is a place of continuous flux. And in that, for many reasons, objects appear and disappear. Entrances to the underground appear and disappear. And it might just have to do with the way the sun hits the water and it hits the mountains. Who knows? But either way, it's a very magical space for the fact that there are many multi-layered realities existing compressed within that area, where in other places they exist as well. They're just actually allowed that leniency to sort of inflate or, exist in their natural space. Things are sort of crushed in Montauk and squished together. So the veils are very thin there.
What do you actually think a portal is? Like you hear it just used kind of generically, but you think they're all the same? Portals are all garden variety, or they're different levels of portals?
I think there must be certain levels, differing levels to portals. I think in many senses, a portal is an opening in an etheric field. So it has to do directly with the Earth's spherical energy that's around it. It has to do with its aura. I think portals are generally travel points from one area of the Earth to the next. You can go into other dimensions, but these could be seen more or less as highways rather than realms that you would just hang out in. They're just to travel from one place to the next.
The good old portal gun.
Yeah, I love it, dude.
It's an unregistered portal gun.
Loved that show, man. When it came out, I thought they hit the nail on the head.
Hey, it comes out again next week.
I haven't been following it lately.
Season 6 or 5.
Oh,
I love that show. Yeah, it's going.
Fun. Good for them. Sorry, I didn't mean to curse, but good for them, man. Seriously.
Oh, we can cuss on here. Doesn't matter.
Okay.
No one's watching. I don't know.
After
after this conversation, they may be. I mean, that's the kind of stuff I could sit here with my legs crossed and just listen all day.
Oh, believe me, I know what that's like, man. And with the research that we do, that's what we end up doing when we listen to some of these lectures.
Yeah, when you get off the portals, I used to think 10 years ago, I'd think, well, that's where I jump off the train. But after recently, like nothing's off the table. Just, I mean, it might sound, it sounds, well, not to you, but to like the regular person, like, well, he's full of shit. He's portals. I'm like, well, what else is? I mean, they just admitted UFOs 6 months ago. What else isn't out there? They're not. If they're telling us that, what do they got in their pocket? What's up their sleeve?
You better believe it. I mean, the whole suit is made of
50 years beyond your wildest imagination. I mean, what is that? That's my imagination is pretty wild.
Yeah, I would say the same for myself. And I mean, if they're going to sit here and say, "Hey, we're beyond that," well, I want to know what they're seeing. I want to know what they're experiencing. But there's such a separation between those experiences. They're on a whole different level altogether, wherein they're now presiding over an entire world full of life. They're not doing a great job at it, but that's what they're doing. I
mean, have you seen Apollo 18? The moon landing Cloverfield?
I think I did. I don't recall though.
You should just go ahead and watch it again. It's secret moon project to go get the Russians that no one knew were there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing. But I can imagine if that's like proof of concept for that kind of thing, I can't imagine what's actually going on.
They only let a little bit out in the entertainment, but what they let out, is significant. Some people think it's preparing us for what comes next. Honestly, I think it's just telling us what's happening now. People look at some of these events and they say, "Oh, this is so futuristic. In the future we'll have time travel. We'll do this. We'll do that. We'll be able to vacation on the moon." We're starting to work towards that now. In a lot of different ways. We've heard stories of people saying, I met a time traveler and this person came in and, they said they were just coming on vacation because in their time period, which wasn't far off from ours, but I think it was on a different timeline. They said, this is something that the elite and affluent can really do. They can spend some kind of money and take a week in some colonial period if they wanted to, or they could come back to this era and witness the birth of the internet. They treat, historical events as some sort of tourist attraction, when you talk about time travel, and they say it's a casual thing. No, not everybody has the ability to do this or access to it, because again, this is more or less for the elite, but they do hold certain things aside, and not give everything to the public, but the public can utilize it through their means. So, if that's the case, that it's somewhere in our immediate or even distant future, we have the ability or the opportunity to kind of travel back and just witness certain events. That's pretty impactful. I mean, where do you go from there?
Yeah, I've thought about that. Not my original idea, but like why, like events like off the top of my head, the crucifixion, baby Hitler. Like how are there not like 10,000 time travelers in every one of those stories?
Honest to God, I think it has to do with timelines, but I don't know. I mean, some of them. Well, see, the thing was with some of the projects, they were going back and they were doing something silly or very medial to see if it affected the timeline as it went forward. So, for example, you would be sent back, 50 years to this one little grocery shop, and in the shop, you were to go in there and steal an apple off the counter. Okay, they'd be doing this for a multitude of times to see what the effect would be, that ripple effect, right? That the whole butterfly effect. And by the end of the project, they were having that same person go into that same store and now shoot the owner instead of just take the apple and see what that would do. So they were playing with timelines. They were destroying timelines and different things in it without having any cognizance of what they were actually doing. So it's curious to think about.
And that apple was the Berenstain apple from the Mandela.
It very well could have been. It might have been called Mandela too. You never know.
God, that stuff, that certain Mandela things freak me out. But I know most of them are just things that you just don't remember.
Indeed.
But there's a couple. I'm like, no freaking way, man. That's not what that was 15 years ago.
Yeah, you think about it too. I mean, there are some very interesting memories, that I can even drum up that I could say, all right, like Berenstain, how they spell it, maybe I just saw it a certain way. And in that interpretation, there was a retention effect. And, in my head, that's how I'm spelling it. It's like somebody, I don't know, spelling a word and putting an extra E in there somewhere just because it's a habitual thing and they haven't, broken that out of themselves. It could be something simple as that. But there are other cases where it does seem like there was a mass shift in consciousness or perception. And from what I understand, we're changing dimensions every moment of every, I would just say it like that, every single moment, with every choice that we make, with every thought that we have, we're creating a certain line, so to speak, but we're actually skipping into different dimensions. So inherently, by that definition, we are already time travelers. Just not the way we would think.
Oh, yeah. I've always heard we're all time travelers 1 second at a time. And as far as the Berenstain Bears go, I wasn't old enough to actually know how to spell when it came on. And so I never was too concerned with that one, because Lord knows it could have been anything. When I was born in '83. And so I don't remember how it was actually spelled. But Fruit Loops, that gets me sometimes. Just follow your nose. And Curious George's tail kind of gets me too. But I don't know. Chimps don't have tails anyway, so
I think there were I don't know. See, now we get into that realm a little bit. I mean, I remember him having a tail. I remember him also not having a tail. And to me, maybe there was a book that he had a tail. I mean, I don't recall. But maybe somebody else could tell me he never had a tail in any of the publications. So then it would be what? A false memory, perhaps.
I'll tell you the one that gets me the absolute worst off the top of my head, and is the damn Monopoly guy with his monocle. I mean, Ace Ventura, he had a monocle, and Ace Ventura wouldn't have punched the dude in the face if he didn't have a monocle. I mean, that one gets me harder than any of them, because I'm like, he totally had a freaking monocle. He never not had a monocle.
That is a good one.
That's the one that gets me. That's the one I can't let him loose. Like I'll give him everything else. Bears sting bears. I couldn't spell then anyway, and I couldn't spell a quasi Jewish German word anyway at age 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
But Ace Ventura punched a guy because he had a monocle, and he had a monocle. Maybe I remember Mr. Peanut. I don't know. But
I mean, I thought the Monopoly guy had a monocle too. But
like I had a Monopoly game when I was little in 4th grade, and I want to find it because there's a damn Monopoly. There was a damn monocle in that game.
Mm-hmm. Makes you go back and look again. But I mean, for me, it was Nelson Mandela. The very first, in a sense. I remember when he died. I remember hearing about it. I remember seeing the news reports about it. So unless somebody falsely reported his death, as far as I knew, he died. And then all of a sudden he was released from jail. I'm like, wait a minute, what happened?
Are you older than me? I'm 39.
I'll be 41 next month.
Okay.
So not by much.
Yeah, that's what you remember how when I guess you definitely remember the 80s then.
Oh yeah.
Like news would come out in these jumbled, garbled, the way you remember them, and like you like piece them together in your mind, like maybe that happened. Like I was just a child when Nelson Mandela, supposedly died in 86 or 88.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was like, it was like, I mean, news always had a certain monopoly even back then.
Mm-hmm.
And what was being reported, I mean, Connie Chung said it best. In respect to permission granted, what was licensed in respect to a story that, the White House or the Pentagon is going to let them do. That's where it came from. Obviously, she was reprimanded intensely. Okay, lost her job and didn't return to television for quite some time. But this is how it went. You know what I mean? It's always possible there was a false report. Somebody picked it up at the time. They followed through with it. We did see something like that. And it was just, again, a false interpretation of what was really happening.
Or maybe he got sick in jail. Something like that happened. Everybody remembers just a hoopla about him.
It's quite possible.
There's a couple other examples like that you can think of from that time period. Like when Bill Clinton had a heart attack, no one ever remembers that.
Nope.
He had open heart. He had open heart surgery. And I remember learning about how the vice president took over for that, hour and a half. Yeah, Al Gore was president for a couple of minutes.
He got a taste of it finally.
Yeah, turned him super cereal. Man, bear pig.
Excuse me.
All right. Yeah, I think we're about ready to wrap it up. This has been. I'm going to go till 10 p.m. if I don't.
Okay.
and plus, you're such a wealth of knowledge that I can have you back on and take full advantage of your generosity until you block me totally. So
that won't ever happen.
Wear you out like an old pair of shoes. Fuck, it's that redneck from Alabama trying to talk about Bigfoot again. Well, before I let you go, what was that? I
say the beautiful thing is that there's always research to be done, and as long as we're going out boots on the ground, we're learning something new. Even as something as old as the Montauk story, now we're going back 70 years, right? Even further, but for all intents and purposes, what's tangible, it's about 70 years. And yet we're still out there learning new things about Camp Hero. We're learning new things about that project, other projects that were involved. People are remembering more. So there's always a progression within these fields. It's a matter of just paying attention and being able to catch the right people.
Truth. And on that same note, back 70 years of the government and how we're just now finding out things that 10 years ago, if they mentioned it, you would think they were crazy. Like put them in a straitjacket.
Oh yeah.
And like David Fravor, the gimbal, like they wouldn't have came out 15 years ago, even though it was 2004.
Never would have been on mainstream media. You might have seen it on Unsolved Mysteries if they were able to get the hand on
hell
it.
Yeah.
License it.
Yeah.
But
I've been planning a show. I'm gonna invite you to it, obviously, but Preston didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I think me and Wild Trees, you know who that is.
Oh yeah, I know Wild Trees very well.
Yeah, I'm on his show every so often. He's been on here once too. Mm-hmm. We're gonna do a show about why what was the concept? Why can't we know? I think why can't we know about cryptids? Why can't we know about what they know? I wanted to cut like maybe you, maybe Preston, maybe Wild Trees down and let you just like slug it out, so to speak,
Sure.
breaking that part down. That's because I've been wanting to know that my whole life. I'm like, why can't we know? And other than Tommy Lee Jones, people are smart, humans are crazy. Kind of his little monologue. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, I do.
People are smart, but mankind's nuts and savage monkeys.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'd be honored to do that, my friend.
Yeah,
I think that would
sounds fun.
some good results.
Need to get some edibles and pass them around.
That's it, brother. Light up that one too. Get it going.
If I were allowed to do it for my job, I would. Show enough,
son.
Well, all right, this has been amazing, and I will let you get back to your Eastern time zone.
All right, thank you very much, brother. I appreciate you having me on. It's been an honor.
All right, it's been amazing. Yeah, thanks again, and I will have you back on.
All right, thank you, Justin. I appreciate it, buddy.
All right, have a good evening.
All right, mate. You do the same. We'll talk to you soon. All right, bye-bye now.